Working with controls, basic controls. Alright, so in this video we're going to cover part 1 of our control video here by taking a look at basic controls. And basic controls are those common everyday controls that are a part of every single application with the user interface. And we're talking about our buttons, our labels, our text boxes, our list boxes, our check boxes, things of that nature. Alright, so let's jump into our outline here and just take a quick focus on what we're going to be learning about in this video. We're going to start off with command and display controls. And these are the controls that, again, are going to be a part of every application that users are going to be interacting with. Command controls are pretty much your buttons, your link labels, which is pretty much a label, only it's clickable, of course, because it'll look like a hyperlink and it'll take you, probably to somewhere outside of your application. So we'll look at those controls that users interact with in order to make things happen within the application. We'll also take a look at display controls, such as your labels, for instance. And labels, of course, are what explain other controls, give users an idea of what that control is about. So we'll take a good look at these here. Then we'll jump into text and edit controls. We'll look. These are, of course, controls that users are going to use to manipulate data and work with data within an application. We'll look at the text box, the masked edit box control, and we'll also look at the numeric up and down and the domain up and down control. So all controls have to do with editing text, different kinds of text, formatted text, and even alphanumeric or just numeric only text. Then we'll look at just a brief look at our list controls here. We'll take a look at the list box. And we'll talk about the combo box and the checklist box, but all these list controls pretty much are the exact same thing. It's just they visually appear different and the user can interact with them a little differently. Now, how we're going to do this is I'm going to show you these individually, but we're also going to take a look at that application, the monitor application that we've started working on in the last video. We're going to take it to the next level in this video and begin expanding on it. And then we'll do it again in our advanced control video in the next one too. Alright, so let's jump right into it here by minimizing the whiteboard, and we'll head on down to the Start button, up to Programs, over to Visual Studio 2005, and we'll open up the integrated development environment here by clicking on Visual Studio 2005. And here is the project that we're going to be working with, 70-526_05-Basic Controls. And what I did here is I actually expanded the application we were working on in our previous video. And just to remind you here, if we open up our monitor form _version 1, I made a folder here that contains the last video's project. Now if I open this up, this should look familiar, right? Here's the beginning of our application that we're going to build from scratch. And now let's go ahead and take a look at the new monitor form that I threw together. You can see I expanded on it using all the controls that we're going to learn in this video. And then we're going to expand on it again in the next video, and then again in the following video when we get into databases and starting to fill data into this application. So you can see it expanded quite a bit. We went from a very simple little interface to a little more of a complex interface with the actual details that we're going to be tracking if we were to really build a network SQL Server monitor as we are. Alright, so we're going to start off with buttons controls here, command controls, and label controls. Let's start off with the button controls here. And you can see what I did here is I actually threw a bunch of buttons down here because if this was a database application, the user is going to need the capability of doing things such as adding a new SQL Server into here if they want to monitor it, right? Editing information, maybe the IP address changed on that server. Maybe they want to change the interval at which it is monitored at. Maybe they want to change some checkboxes here. Maybe they want to turn off monitoring for whatever reason or turn off recording the history every time it pings it to find out if it's up and running or not, right? So we need to give them the capability of editing. We need to give them the capability of deleting servers out of the monitor. And then of course we need to give them the capability to save and cancel. And of course these aren't going to all be enabled at the same time. Really we're going to have states of the application. So when the application first fires up, new is going to be enabled. And that's pretty much it, right? When they click on an item, new and edit and delete will be enabled. And then when they click on new or edit, save or cancel will be enabled. So we'll get into a little bit of this stuff later. In fact, I might just end up doing some of this stuff because that's really just, there's no real technique to it. It's just, doing that in code. And I like to call that interface plumbing code. So, and you know what? Just to show you how buttons work in this video, we're going to actually take these buttons in the next video and put them onto a toolbar because really a couple of them don't belong inside of the details. So just to give you a quick overview of how this works, once we click on an item in the list, it's going to go to the database and get the information and fill it in all inside of these controls, right? And then we'll set up all the controls the way they should be when an item's clicked. So that's kind of how the application is going to flow. And of course, you kind of set these things up when you're designing your user interface of all the possible things users can do. So what's going to happen when they click on an item in a list? What's going to happen when they click on the new button, the edit button, the delete button, the save button, the cancel button, and even the close button in some cases. So you kind of get a look at your application, see all the points that a user could perform an action, and then just kind of create a flowchart of what you want your application and the controls and the data on that application to do when they do something of that nature. And for small applications, you can even get away with using Notepad for doing something like that. And just to give you a quick visual on what I'm talking about here, I like to do this on small applications. Just create, get all the objects that could be clicked or all the different things that could happen, and then create a little flowchart for each one. And you can see this isn't a true flowchart. As I said, you can use Notepad here. Flowcharts would be great for large applications where you really want to detail all the process flow within your user interface. But in this case, I just kept it simple. If they click on the list view item, what do we want to do? Fill the details control. Enable that control group, because by default, this control group here is going to all be disabled until the user clicks on an item in a list, right? We don't want them doing anything in here when there's no data to do anything against. And you can see when the new button's clicked, enable the detail controls, clear the detail controls, set defaults, and then obviously we're probably going to want to enable the save and cancel controls here as well. I forgot to put that one in there. And I just started this just to give you an idea. I just kind of threw this together. So that's kind of outside the realm of this specific video, but I just kind of wanted to throw that out there because a lot of people get confused off the bat on how to do these sorts of things. But just, write it down and kind of walk yourself through it. Create yourself a map, if you will, on how a user would walk through the application. All right, back to where we're supposed to be here, talking about buttons and labels. You can see our button controls that we have down here. Very simple. I just dragged them onto the toolbox. I used all of our layout features that we learned in the previous video to line them all up accordingly. And then, of course, I named them accordingly here, too. We have BTN new for this one, BTN edit, BTN, forgot to put the delete button on there. Here we go. We can rename this to BTN delete. And there we are. And then we have, of course, save and cancel as well. All right, so with buttons, really, the most popular thing to do with them, obviously, here is to write code behind them to do something, which is called writing code in their click event. And we're going to do that here in a second. But as far as properties go and the visual appearances, some of the more common things to do is you can set their visual appearance. And what I like to do on buttons that perform actions within a form, I like to set their flat style here to pop up. And here's the property flat style. Since I chose all of them, this is going to affect all these buttons. And if we turn it to pop up, what that basically means is once you can see it's kind of the 2D appearance. Once the user holds their mouse over it, it'll pop up. Just give them the visual appearance that they're currently over that button. And why I like to do this is this kind of gives them the indication that these buttons work with data and work with this specific form, where the 3D buttons perform an action outside. So in this case, the close button is obviously going to close the form. And we're going to actually put two more buttons on here. I'll just grab a button out of the toolbox, place it over here. Let's put this one on the left-hand side and line it up here with our other button. There we go. And I'm going to drag one more on here. Perfect. And then we're going to just make these the same size as our close button there. All right. And one of these is going to be our options form. So we'll just go ahead and change the text here to options. And then one of these is going to be our about form. So we'll call it about. So these are going to take us outside of this form. The options form is going to fire open our options form, of course, so users can make configuration changes about the application. And then our about button is going to take us to our about form. So these all perform actions that take us outside of this form. And then these buttons obviously all work within the data on this form. So that's kind of one little thing that I see, which I picked up because I thought it was a great idea. That gives users that understand that a visual cue of what that button, where that button is going to perform its actions from. All right, so let's write some code behind these buttons here. And to get to the button's click event, pretty easy to do. You can just double-click on the button. That'll obviously take us into the click event, and we have to rename this button here. And let's go ahead and do that. Go back to our main form here. Let's go ahead and name this our options button to BTN options, and our about button here to BTN about. Now, one thing I just want to mention here, if we double-click on our options button to go in that click event, you can see it's going to keep the method name the same as it originally was, button 1. But the method name is just the name. That really affects nothing. It's really this handles clause at the end. This is what handles the fact the click event itself, right? So other than that, it's just a method signature is what we call that. So you can actually change this manually yourself, which is what we'll do here. We'll say BTN Actually, was that options? Yes, that was options, not about. Options, there we go. So now we have the signature, the method signature for that block of code there for our options click event. Another way to do this, if we click on the about button here, you can see this lightning bolt over here. Well, if we click on it, it'll take us into a listing of all the events, right? And now what you can do is just drop down the click event, and you can see what this will actually do is if you want to tie this about to any other basically any other procedure out there, you can. So that's another way to do it, is just to write a procedure, and then you can tie this button to that procedure. All right. Another thing to do is just double click on the click event like I did there, inside of the properties window here. If you double click on this, it'll actually create the skeleton, just like double clicking on the button. So a couple of ways to get into events here within the code window. So for our options here, we just want to basically open up our options form here and make it, we want to make both of these forms when we open them up dialog forms, meaning that a user can have both forms open at the same time. They can only have one or the other open. So this is pretty easy. We've worked with this before, so we're just going to go ahead and dim a form here. We'll call this dim frm options as a new options form, right? And then we'll say frm options dot show. We'll pass in the owner. Actually, we'll just do a show dialog here. There we go. And that should do it. You can optionally pass in the owner here. Why don't we do that? And we'll call it me. All right. Pretty straightforward there. So we'll go ahead and copy that code. We'll paste it down here, and we're just going to change the word options to about. Copy that. Paste it there. And we'll call this about form. There we go. Pretty easy, right? So we got that all in place. Now, one thing I want to do here is actually show you our about form. I'm going to go ahead and double click on it to take us into it here. And we're going to work with the OK button on this one. What we're going to do with this button specifically is we're going to work with the accept and cancel button. And what this is if you go to the form level here, right, and you can see there's an accept button property and we have a cancel button property. And I believe we did talk about this in a previous video, but I'll just cover it really quickly again here. The accept button is what happens when the user hits their enter button anywhere on this form. So it's kind of a shortcut, giving them a shortcut. And we're going to say we want this to hit OK here, btn OK. So you can see the form will then highlight this button with the enter key, with a border to let us know that this is kind of the default action is on this button. So we have this open. The user doesn't have to actually click over there. They can just hit enter on their keyboard. And since it's the only button on this form, we can actually go ahead and go on down to the cancel button and do the same thing, right? So now we have it on both of them. So now they can hit escape or enter. So one other way to use the accept and cancel buttons is to use the same button for both, and that's good for about forms. So we'll save that there, and that should do it for the actual command buttons themselves. Let's go ahead and just test this out to make sure everything works. Close out of our code windows here. We'll go ahead and hit run, and as soon as this fires up here, let's hit our options first. And look at that, everything looks good on our options screen. The only thing we didn't do is write code to cancel OK or cancel. So we'll go back to that. We can hit the X button though, thankfully, otherwise we'd be stuck there forever. And here's our about button. If we click on that, there's our about. You can see we need to, I actually never ran this one, so we need to work on the size of this one a little bit. We'll expand it so the name fits, and that should be about it. We'll just expand it a little bit there. But here's our OK button. You can see I got my mouse off over to the side. I'll hit enter here, and you can see it closes out of it. Right, no problem. The only other thing we need to do is write some code here for our close button as well. So we're going to go ahead and close out of that. If we go into our close button on our main form here, we'll double click on that to get into the click event for our close. Here we go. Give ourselves some space here. All we need to do, in most cases what you can do is just a me.close, right? And that will actually just close the form. In this case, since it's the only form and it's the main form, it will actually exit the application as well. So that's kind of nice. If we go to our options form and we hit the, let's go ahead and do the cancel button. We'll save the OK button. Actually, in both instances, we are going to end up closing the form. It's just that the OK button, we're going to save these changes probably to a local file, a local preferences file, or maybe even the database if we have a lot of options, or we have options that require a database. So let's go ahead and double click on our cancel button here. Same thing, me.close. All right, and OK. Same thing. We'll put this further down here because we know we're going to end up writing code to do other things within the OK button as well, other than just close it. All right, so we'll save it all, and that should be it. Now let's move on to labels. And of course labels are used to describe the control that's usually